In today's edition of the Purple Coffee Podcast, I interviewed Dan Miller about losing it all and getting it back again, and how I approach email, a staple part of my daily in and out. Hello and welcome to session 9 of the Purple Coffee Podcast, inspiring stories from creative entrepreneurs. I am your host, Turn Dog, and in today's edition I have the pleasure to interview Dan Miller, who is an entrepreneur and writer who's done a bit of everything over the years. I can't wait to share Dan's insight with you, but first I want to talk a little about email. I send a lot of emails. I'm always emailing potential interviewees for this podcast and for my books. I'm always interviewing fellow writers and artists, and I'm emailing people about potential collaborations. I'm always sending messages to local businesses to see if we can work together in some way or another. The emails add up, and it's truly easy to lose track. For instance, I might have the intention to reply and follow up someone's email a week later, but unless you note that down, you're not going to remember. And it's okay to say you'll note them all down, but when you're sending hundreds and hundreds of emails each month and you're receiving hundreds and hundreds each week, well, I'm sorry, but it's too easy to forget. But I found 2 plugins that help a great deal. The first is called Signals by HubSpot, and it works through an integration with Gmail, and you can also download it for Outlook or Apple Mail, and it just creates a little tick box when you're writing an email. So you write an email to Joe Smith and you want to know whether Joe opens up your email, but you might also want to know whether Joe clicks on the link to the page that you hope they will look at. Without Signals, you can't know this, but with Signals you can. Because if you click the little tick box, it basically sends a notification when Joe opens and how often from then he opens your email again, and it also lets you know whether he clicks on any links within the email. An absolute game changer in my opinion. And although some CRM softwares do provide this, HubSpot Signals is free, at least for the first 200 notifications each and every month, and so far I've not gone over this limit. And as a guy who uses email a lot, that's pretty impressive. So I'm going to add the Signals link below this video, and that will be on the page, which if you type in bit.ly/purplecoffee9, you'll be taken to this sessions page. And yeah, Signals is something you should check out the video, see how people are using it. I'm sure you'll be a fan, and yeah, you'd be crazy to not sign up. The second one is called followup.cc, and I love this because I always like to follow up people. You send one email and that's great, but usually you won't get a reply until you follow up for a second or maybe even for a third time. Now there's a fine balance. You don't want to be spamming people, but folk are busy. I often don't respond to people until they follow up a week later because, the email, it drops down their inbox. They have the intention to get back in touch, but they just forget. So follow-ups do work, and the amount of times I've gotten the interview or had the meeting because of a follow-up is insane. But again, you can quickly forget these. You have the intention to follow up Jim a week after you've sent him that original email, but you forget. With follow-up, that is taken care of, because in the blind copy section of the email, you just have to type in 1w@followup.cc, and a week later, Follow-up sends you an email basically saying it's time for you to follow up Jim Smith. So I'm like, okay, I will press reply and I will follow him up right there and then. Now you might think that's an arduous task to type in that every time, but all you have to do is send follow-up and message and they reply, and once that is done, all their various options are embedded into your contact folder. So whether you want to follow up after an hour, a day, a week, on a particular time, on a particular date, Follow-up have you covered. Like I say, I'll put the link below this video on bit.ly/purplecoffee9. Check it out, check out the video, see how it can help. And like I say, this is a true game changer. I'm already signed up to the pro account because I use it that much, and it's helped me in my email conquering world so much. So yeah, check both those plugins out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think about them. But we'll now get on to the main part of today's session, and it is all about Dan Miller, who is a writer and owner of 38days.com. These days, he's doing a great deal of coaching and consulting and helping people finding their passion and the thing that gets them vigor and gets them going in the morning. But before that, Dan has done a great deal, and it included losing the odd business here and there. We talk about his great mistake, which is losing a lot of money, owing money to the IRS. It was an emotional and financial and physical strain, and it's something you don't wish on your biggest enemy. But Dan got through it. He realised that he was chasing this money that he thought was there to be made rather than passion. And since then, he's been able to develop a world built around passion, writing, doing things he loves, working with people he adores. And well, you just have to check him out to see that he's doing rather well indeed. So I'm now going to pass over to that interview with Dan. I'm sure you'll take a great deal from it. There's lots of lessons to be learned, so get your pen and notepad out. But first, you may want to know a little bit more about Mr. Miller. So I went on his about page and I rejigged his story to share it in a way only I can. I do, after all, create stories, so why not? So I will do that right now and look away from the camera and read. So here we go. Dan Miller has seen it all. A true entrepreneur who has done a little of everything over the years. These days he writes books, speaks a great deal, and runs a business called 48 Days, which helps people find their true calling over a 48-day period. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's called 48 Days for this exact reason, right? Wrong. Because Dan Miller is actually an alien, not too dissimilar to Superman, except he can't fly as far as I know. He is super fast and super strong though, and on his home planet, IM 357D, a year lasts exactly 48 days. Whether this is because the sun is small or the planet is super fast, I'm not too sure. But that's the truth, and you can take that and bank it, because I am a Yorkshireman, which means I cannot tell a lie. So, here's myself and Dan chatting over Skype. I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Miller this evening, who is an author and a speaker and business owner and pretty much everything else in between. He's very experienced, got loads of wisdom, and I'm very excited to hear his insight about mistakes and overcoming them. And this is all for the successful mistake. So Dan, first of all, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, my pleasure. I love talking about these business things.
Yeah, it's good, and I'm sure you have so much of it to share from all your experience with various things. It's going to be a good one. I must say, I'm rather intrigued to see what you sort of say and have to share with us. So to start with, please give us an insight into you and what you do and that whole jazz.
Well, I am at this time author, speaker, and coach. So those are the three things that take up my time. Now, the thing I love most is writing. So writing is my first love. I do everything else just to give me more opportunities, more excuses to write. Now, it hasn't always been that way. I mean, I've done that for about 20 years. Prior to that, I'm an entrepreneur from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. So I did a variety of other things as I just had fun learning business principles and learning internet marketing. So that all came from doing other things like car sales and health and fitness business, other things. But then I found my sweet spot and all the technology that makes it work so easily, and now being an author, speaker, and coach.
Fantastic. And like you say, the technology these days, you can reach so many people with coaching, and books can be, there's no shelf life on books anymore, which is fantastic with the invent of things like Amazon. And indeed, speaking now, that's moving on to online. There's a lot of conferences these days which are online. You don't even have to get out of your pajamas in the morning. You can listen to amazing people give amazing talks.
And that's the way I start my day. I start my day listening to podcasts while I'm on the treadmill. And I usually vary the speed in the podcast so I get at least 2 or 3 in during my 60 minutes on the treadmill.
Wow. That is a good way to start the day. I'm liking it. I start
Yeah.
mine with sleepy-eyed reading blogs, but I think the podcast might be the best route to go. I don't have to do any
Uh,
reading then. Well, I must say, I'm delighted that you're on board, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. I've seen some of your interviews, and it's always very insightful. So I hope that you'll start by just giving us a bit of a tale about one of the mistakes that you've made along your journey, how it came about, what happened, and ultimately then how you turned it around and took the steps afterwards into what is obviously a great success, because you're having a great life these days, being a writer and a speaker and a coach.
Yes, I love the life I'm living today. Well, I don't think anybody gets to extraordinary success without stubbing their toe a couple times along the way. And I certainly have. But I have a different view of failure than what many people have anyway. I just see it as a part of the learning process. So I don't see it as a stopping point. And I'm always baffled by people who have a failure and then they just give up and stay there, because I have to believe that it's a necessary part of the process to get to ultimate success. So they're giving up the momentum that they were gaining once they get to that failure. Anyway, we could talk about that all day long. But about 20 years ago, being an entrepreneur, I had some early successes, probably found it too easy. And so I got sloppy in what I was doing. I know that. I got spread too thin, and I bought a business. It was a health and fitness center where I had no interest in the business at all, but I simply looked at the money that was being generated, just looked at the cash flow and thought, well, this is a no-brainer. I'll just do this. So I bought the business, realized very quickly that I didn't enjoy it, but it was, in fact, a cash cow. But some things happened in that period of time. The bank that I was dealing with changed ownership 3 times in 2 years. So all the good old boy handshake relationships I had kind of went out the window. New people started looking at the arrangements I had and started getting nervous about some of the open lines of credit that I had. I made some changes in the business too quickly. Changed from the old kind of granddaddy memberships that we used to have, where you sign somebody up for 3 years, get all the cash up front, and then hope they never come back again. I mean, that's kind of what that business was built on. And I changed it because I didn't feel good about that. So I changed to a monthly membership. And in the long run, that was a much healthier, more ethical thing to do. But in the short term, it really hurt my cash flow. Well, the combination of the bank getting nervous and the crunch in my cash flow put me in a real untenable position. And I ended up selling that business at a public auction. Again, not really thinking it was a big deal. But when all was said and done, I owed about $430,000 and had no assets. Well, part of what I owed was to the IRS, which was a horrible mistake because they don't give any kind of leniency or grace at all. And that compounded my problem exponentially. So I lost our house, our cars, everything. I didn't file bankruptcy because I just was committed that I was going to work my way out of that and keep my word with people that I owed money to, and legitimately so. But it took a long time to recover from that. However, in the process of that horrendous experience, humiliating, everything that it was, devastating to our family financially, but in the process, I learned some things about business that I needed to know. And one of those was just the marvelous recognition that you can build a business without having just big buildings and lots of employees. I discovered these wonderful ways to have a business that could grow exponentially without having either a building or employees. And it's wonderful to know that. And so I've taken advantage of things that we can do to leverage intellectual capital. I mean, the things that I get to do today as an author, speaker, coach, I mean, I joke sometimes, if people knew what we were doing, it'd be illegal. I mean, I spoke recently to a group of restaurant owners, and these poor guys are trying to figure out how to make a net 4 or 5% profit on what they do. Well, my gosh, I'm used to making 97% or 100% profit, not 4 or 5. I mean, we create an audio CD, cost us 37 cents to produce it. We sell it for $11. I mean, that's 97% profit. Or when I speak, I mean, there's no product to deliver at all. I just speak and get paid exorbitant amounts for that. I mean, how cool is that? And I don't think I would have discovered these things had I not gone through that horrendous experience in a more traditional business. But in that failure, in that experience, it opened my eyes to some new things that I am thrilled that I had the opportunity to learn.
That's fantastic, and yeah, it is that traditional sense where back in yesteryear, if you wanted a business pre-internet, you had to have a shop or you had to have a warehouse. There was always that physical entity, and with that, it brought up so much capital. And I suppose that you kind of saw potential money in the health and fitness, but was it not your passion? Where were you before then? What business had you come out of?
I at the same time, I had an auto accessories business, and I was teaching as a adjunct professor at the university. So I had other things that were going on anyway. And that's one of the red flags. I got myself spread too thin, but I really, I enjoy physical health and exercise and nutrition, but I don't enjoy going to a gym. I don't enjoy, I see it as a waste of time. Wait on equipment and hang around shooting the breeze with other people. It just takes too much time. I hit the treadmill in the morning. I've got a Soloflex in my workout room, and no waiting. I can be on there. And as I told you a little bit ago, I listen to podcasts when I'm on the treadmill in the morning. So I'm getting that rich input, pure positive input, ideas that are being generated. That's how I start my day. So I wasn't really a good fit for the business that I bought, which is one of the red flags I teach people about today. Don't buy a business unless it lines up with your passion. If it doesn't, it's too much work, it's too much risk. Do something that you're already passionate about and you're halfway home in being successful.
Absolutely, and it must have taught you so many lessons. One, don't get in too deep into something that's going to tie up your cash, because it can, be devastating not just to your business world but your personal world too. But the second thing is, I'm guessing it helped you appreciate what you had before and what you can have in the future, in this aspect of it's not always about money, not always about going after the cash cow, but find something that you're passionate about, find something that you are good at and you can get up and enjoy. And it led you to going onto the internet, speaking more, writing, which at the beginning of this interview you said you like writing above all else. So it took that knock for you to ultimately get to where you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll have to admit too, Matthew, that I had some real advantages even in the middle of that horrendous failure. Because when I see people who go through failure and then they stay down, almost without exception, you can identify things in their life that are missing. And it's not just about money, it's not just about being successful in business, but the things that I had that I see are necessary components of recovering from failure are supportive relationships, uncompromising integrity, vibrant health, optimistic faith, clear purpose. Those are the things that allowed me, and I say that in all humility, but those are the things that allowed me to come back pretty quickly from my overwhelming failure that I went through. And when I see people get stuck, it's because they're missing some of those foundational pieces.
That's really interesting that you say that, because obviously you mentioned losing in excess of $400,000, owing money to the tax man, which, they always say, always pay the tax man. If you can pay the tax man, everything else is usually not too bad. But I suppose some people can file for bankruptcy and their moral self will allow that to happen. But I think in this modern age, many of us can't do that. We feel ethically obliged to, if we owe money, we pay that money back. And at the very beginning, you said you don't necessarily understand how some people come across failure and then that be the end. They hit that bump and then they stop. But every now and then you will get these big bumps, like $400,000 lost. What would you advise to someone who goes through something similar, something where everything inside them is just saying, give up, go get a job at a bank, do whatever it needs to do and just look after your family? I mean, it must have been emotionally very draining. You say it was relationships and, you know, being healthy and everything. What was it that simple, or were there other things that sort of helped you get out?
Well, it isn't simple at all, but those things really had a lot to do with my recovery and being able to come through that. You know, I've been married to the most amazing woman in the world for a very, very long time. You know, her unconditional support, no pointing fingers, criticizing. She could have said, I told you so. There were a whole lot of things that she could have said during that period, but she didn't. She just loved me and supported me and encouraged me. And at that period of time, when I owed all that money, I knew that I had two clear options. I could have gone with a very safe route. I was very employable. I could have just taken a position as a professor at a university. And so let's say that I made $60,000 a year. But that was not appealing to me at all, not for an instant, never, because the math just didn't work. If I owed $500,000, even if I lived with a family, with a wife and three children, if we lived on $40,000 a year, just eked out a living and paid $20,000 on the debt, it would have taken me the rest of my life to ever pay that back. I wasn't interested in that. I wanted something where I jumped right back in the business game again, something where I could potentially, you know, figure out how to have a big shovel so that I could get rid of that debt quickly and go on to success again. So even at that point, there was nothing about taking a safe route that was appealing to me. I wanted to jump right back in the game with no guarantees, just like we do as business people, because I knew that had the most potential to get me back on my feet.
And once you are an entrepreneur, it's so much harder to go back to the life before. It's a different breed, isn't it? You know, you like that freedom and you want that confidence. So it is just a case of having faith in yourself, sticking to that passion. And I suppose a lot of people would, when they hit hard times like that, they maybe go into their shell and they don't want to share experiences with other people. Was a big part of it for you actually letting people into that world, not just your wife, but maybe close friends, peers, colleagues, and I guess sharing the burden, sharing the pain and asking for advice and letting people in?
Absolutely. That was unexpected because I was very embarrassed and humiliated. Well, let me give you an example of what happened. I was chairman of the Small Business Development Committee with our local Chamber of Commerce, chairman of the Small Business Development Committee. I went in the next morning after this whole thing went down and I said, look, obviously I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy to be helping other people in their businesses. I obviously don't know how to run my own. I screwed up. I resigned. And they said, oh, no, 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 no. They said, now you really are the guy we want. Before, when you were always successful, you didn't have a realistic overview of what people may go through. Now that you've gone through this, you're exactly the person we want to be working with people who are struggling in their businesses. And that was really affirming, Matthew. I mean, that was had an amazing effect on me to say, I can still be in the game. These people who are other business people, not only did they not just push me out onto the road to die, they said, now you really have some information that's important. Now we want to work with you even more than before when you were always successful. That was an amazing experience. And I had that in a lot of other situations as well.
Absolutely, that must have been amazing. And I think as a general natural human trait, we don't give people enough credit. We do get embarrassed so easily and we think, oh, I don't want to share this mistake, or I don't want to share this burden. I'll keep it to myself. I'll lock myself away. You're embarrassed of what people think and what they'll say. But usually when you hit that rock bottom, that's when people show their true colours and say, you know what, like, you can do this, you can actually get through this, and like, we'll help and we'll pull together. And that must have been so amazing to have all these different people say, no, you are the guy and we still have faith in you and you can do it. Doing it on your own, I mean, to do it on your own to get out of $400,000 in debt would have been tough, but doing it with people around you who care and believe, it suddenly makes it more achievable.
It really did. You know, right now I've got a friend. I've known him for many, many years, and he's one of those that was used to $2,000 suits, first class airfare, first class dining, everything, and he's really at rock bottom. But he has along the way sabotaged his integrity, his relationships. He has nothing. He doesn't have a place to sleep. Now, I'm helping him out a little bit there just temporarily, but I never experienced that. When we went through that, we would have had 20 places where I could have taken my whole family if we really would have gotten to that point. If we would have been that far down, I mean, we have such rich relationships. I would have never had to worry about a place to sleep or a place or food to eat. Now, we didn't go that way and we didn't end up begging her at all, but knowing that we had that kind of unconditional support was a major part of us being able to rebuild our lives.
That's amazing, yeah. And it comes back to that idea of passion, I think, because if you get into business for the wrong reasons, aka you just see the big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it's so easy to kind of be cutthroat, you know, put ethics to one side, not really care about relationships. Oh, it's going really well for me now, so I'll forget about everything else. Whereas if you build a life around passion and you love what you do, that's going to show. And you're not just kind of building colleagues and peers, you're building relationships. So if you go after passion in the beginning, you're not only doing something great now, but just in case something goes wrong down the line, you're going to be a person who everyone wants to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you know, not just that it's a safety net, but
No.
it's a real reassurance
Yeah.
to know that I'm not, but that's the cool thing about being in business. I mean, the thing that I enjoy as much as anything is seeing other people succeed. And I see people who have read my books or that I've had the privilege of coaching, and they've gone on to just amazing success. I mean, that is so cool to watch that. But what that also means is there's a whole lot of people out there that consider me a part of helping them to get where they are. So if I ever needed to draw on that in terms of, hey, now I'm in need, I mean, I have so many resources out there that I could draw on that I could never exhaust them all.
Fantastic. And it's all part of the journey, and you just have to keep your head up high and just keep plugging away. And that perseverance, it really does show. And I'm guessing that from the actual mistake, losing that money and the business being sold on, to getting to a point where you started to grow again, was it a space of a couple of years or?
It wasn't that long, but I had a whole lot of money to repay.
Yeah.
And especially the money that I owed to the IRS began accumulating penalties and interest, and they were absolutely merciless. I mean, to the literal point of having somebody standing in my driveway at 6 a.m. in the morning. It was just really ridiculous. But what I did at that point, I had no money, absolutely nothing. I had no assets of any kind to start a business or do it. But what I did is I jumped right into a commission-only sales position. I mean, I can sell. That's always something that where I can land on my feet. And so I took a position, zero guarantee, no salary, nothing, just the opportunity. And I just hit the streets.
Yeah.
I borrowed an old rattletrap car from a friend of mine. Things smoked like a chimney, used about a quart of oil every 100 miles. But I just needed something to get me around. And I just hit the streets, had a product to sell, and started selling. But within about 4 months, I was back to making $10,000, $12,000 a month.
Wow.
So I started very quickly. You know, we lived very frugally during that period of time, but I started very quickly making some progress on those debts that I had and letting people know that I was going to honor my debts. Now, I was advised by everybody just to file bankruptcy, and it would have wiped out most everything that I had. Now, not the IRS. That doesn't go away even in bankruptcy, but the rest would have. And I told those people, if you sue me, there's nothing there. You'll get nothing. But if you just believe me that I'm going to make good on this, I'll pay you over time. And so I was able to show pretty quickly in small amounts that I was actually going to do that. And nobody did sue me. It wasn't, I mean, people knew me.
Yeah.
And people trusted me. So if it was that I had ordered 200 t-shirts or we had radio time or billboards or whatever, they knew me
Yeah.
and they just believed me. Nobody came after us with a big stick and we just started working our way out.
And again, that comes down to the relationships you build over time. And I think that it's such an amazing vision because you literally hit the streets and hustled your way back. And it's like, right, this might not be what I want to do in the long run, but I'm just going to be proactive, start chipping away at things. And this is where I'm going to be in a year. This is where I'm going to be in 3 years. And in 5 years, it'll just be something I can look back on and laugh. And I'll be, sipping margaritas on the beach or something. And you got to have that end goal and that hustle. It's so fantastic to hear.
And we were doing exactly that last week, sipping margaritas down on the beach.
Fantastic.
So things are good.
Yes, it took a bit of time, but that mistake got you there. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and
Thank
it's been
you.
such an insightful story, and it really is a kind of, I suppose, riches to rags and back again kind of story where it shows that a successful person can make a devastating mistake. Because you obviously had businesses before then, things were going well, but
Yes.
people who have it all can lose it all rather easily. But it doesn't mean that's it. You can still build yourself back up to something that you love even more. And it might mean more money, or it might just mean more time to spend with your family. But sometimes these things, I know one of my favourite stories is an English entrepreneur called Peter Jones, who had a very successful business, lost it all by 30. And by the time he was 35, he had more money. He had a business that suited him even more, and he's now like one of TV's famous entrepreneurs. He's on everything. But
Wonderful.
it took him to like lose everything to get there, and I think them kind of stories are amazing. They're an inspiration.
Just part of the process.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you for your time and your knowledge. And I'm sure everyone watching has appreciated your words. So thank you for watching, and Dan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's been my honor.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching / listening to session 9 of the Purple Coffee podcast. A big thanks to Dan as well for being both part of this podcast and The Successful Mistake. It's a book I cannot wait to share with the world. It's all about an entrepreneur's big mistake and how they've turned it around. And as Dan demonstrated, those big faux pas can be turned around. Nearly $500,000 is a lot of money. Losing your business is a big deal. It's not something you ever set out to achieve, but they can happen. And in Dan's case, he was doing something that he wasn't passionate about, and it led him down a dangerous route. And this is something I've seen time and time again in my interviews with successful entrepreneurs. And you may be in this position right now. Maybe you're thinking about setting up a business. Maybe you're in one and you've lost that passion, or you know it's not right for you. Well, how can you change that? How can you make sure there is passion embedded into your world? How can you make sure you're always building valuable relationships rather than just chasing money? Dan's story is an inspiration to someone like me, because I do believe in the power of passion and relationships. And he shows me that if you keep your eye on these things, good things will happen. Maybe not overnight, but in time. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you've been checking this out on Vimeo, be sure to follow the channel and get all the episodes before everybody else. If you've listened to this on iTunes, please subscribe and leave an honest review, because reviews mean a great deal indeed. And if you want to learn more about Dan and his Twitter page and Facebook, and to also learn about those apps I was talking about beforehand, they will all be on this session's page. So just type in bit.ly/purplecoffee9. You'll be taken on there. Check out the rest of turndogmillionaire.com. And until next time, you crazy cat, have a great one.